And I swam a bit more, and then I heard the lifeguard say, "Oh, it didn't look like anything solid, but I did see her swallow a lot of water." Basically, someone had thrown up in it's like a pool, but it is seawater. And I was like, I think that's my cue to get out.
Welcome to Drum and Drummer, a podcast focused on drums, drumming and drummers. I'm George Pickering, and that's Ben Winty, and we are both professional drummers in this business we call music. So stick around and join us as we pass the time whilst trying to stay in time.
Face down on a table for 5 hours yesterday.
And how was the tattoo?
Good, that's great stuff.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh my God. Much like the Stranger Things character. 11 seconds on a vape pen.
It's too much.
It was too much.
Bit too much, but
Too much.
I'm going for a challenge. Gig on Saturday. Tub of little cookies.
Yeah.
From Tesco. Neil said, "Do you think you could eat all of them?" Yeah. So
Yeah.
I ate all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I had a sugar crash in set 1.
I had a buffet breakfast yesterday. First one. 3 pan of chocolats to start. Big ones as well. And then just, beans, eggs, toast, hash brown, a pot of yogurt. I don't even eat yogurt, but it's there.
If it's there.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of yogurt.
All right. I think we should explain, obviously, I'm here in the studio.
Yep.
And you're
in a park.
In a park.
Yeah, I say
just on your phone. We're just doing a Zoom call. You're on your phone in a park.
In a park. Because, we didn't do the intro and outro to the interview, and now I'm on holiday with my parents. And this episode comes out on Thursday, and I get back from holiday Wednesday night.
Yeah, so I text you, George, did we record an intro and outro? No, I don't think we did. Right, cool. I'm on holiday. Okay, yeah. Well, let's just try and squeeze one.
Let's work it out.
And it's not unprofessionalism at all. This is just two busy drummers.
Yeah.
Living their
you're busy
summer
with
lives.
Work. I'm just on holiday.
Yeah.
But you know what?
Absolutely chowing down on the buffet.
Big time. But I'm not one of those people that goes, I'm on holiday. If you need to contact me, don't. Do you know what? I'm on holiday. But if you need me to do an intro and outro to a podcast, get in touch. Yeah.
Hillsy's #1 drum-based podcast. He's there.
Yeah. I'm there. I'm ready. And I'll quickly explain. Yeah, it's just been a Lido, and we thought the idea of doing the podcast while I'm in a Lido would be hilarious, but it got too loud. Got too loud with kids. Just as we were about to start the Zoom call, they all got out of the pool, and it was just chaotic. So this is quite nice, apart from the wind. But am I wind free now?
It's okay. It's better. It was just as we started. Suddenly, it was all wind and no voice.
Yeah, I've met singers.
It's probably
like
most episodes.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about this week's episode, innit?
Let's do it. Who have we got?
We got another guest. We've got Mel Stewart, and Mel is the brand development manager for the British drum company, the BDC. Yep. This is a drum brand that Woody from Bastille.
Yep.
He uses their kits. He was raving about them. If you've listened to that episode, go back and listen. And so I just thought, fuck it, let's get in touch with BDC. And let's have a chat. I think it might be worth noting, obviously it's a very British drum company heavy episode. This is not a paid endorsement from them for us to do this episode. We just reached out. We were like, we'd love to know a bit more about the BDC, but also just about kind of a bit about how you make drums.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that's something I don't really know about.
No, nor me. And we delved into it. And at times he sort of apologized if it was getting too in depth. We were like, no, if we're going to learn anything about the making of drums, he is the guy. And this is the pod to do it on.
Exactly. Let's just get straight into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
Here we go. Here's our interview with Mel Stewart from the British Drum Company. Thanks so much for giving us some of your time, Mel.
No, it's a pleasure. No worries. Thank you for letting me be here. It's awesome.
Yeah, we're just really keen to learn more about the BDC and
Sure.
and your role within the company. We're aware of the British Drum Company, and we had Woody from Bastille on the show recently.
Awesome. Love Woody.
He was raving about
yeah.
BDC.
He's a big fanboy.
Yeah. And he was saying, he was getting so much attention from other drum techs, playing at festivals and shows, and people seeing his kit and hearing it. So I guess we could start with your role within the company, really, and what you do.
Absolutely. Well, I am the brand development manager for BDC. What that essentially means is that I'm sort of responsible for the majority of the outbound communications from within the company. So I primarily, on a regular basis, communicate with our distribution network, our dealer network, and a lot of our end users, which also encompasses artists to some degree as well, which isn't my primary role. It was historically, as you know. Tina Clark is our artist relations manager now. She's incredible. We're so proud to have Tina on board with us. She's an amazing human being and a very, very talented person. And she does a great job. She's really, really helped us to develop the artist strategy moving forward. But I guess we'll get into that a little bit more later on. I'll just roll back to my role. So that was my responsibility. But now, primarily, I'm involved with a lot of communication between all the different sectors that we deal with on a regular basis, which is obviously the people that distribute our drums within certain territories, the people that sell our drums to the end user, to the drummers in those territories, and then also, of course, the drummers and the artists. So it's a lot of fun. It's varied. It keeps me on my toes quite a lot. And depending on what's happening, admittedly, it's a little bit different since the pandemic. Things aren't quite the way they were in terms of the way I was traveling quite a bit back then. At any given time, I'd maybe taking a trip to the States or China or somewhere in Europe to visit either dealers or our distributors in those areas. But since the pandemic, things have slowed down in terms of actual travel. But I'm just speaking to people a lot on the phone, video calls like this. I really enjoy communicating. It's something that I really get great pleasure in, and sort of knowing people and developing relationships is something that I'm really big on. So it feels like a perfect role for me because I really do get to do a lot of communicating, but also live my life a little bit vicariously through some of our artists as well, through some of the amazing stuff that they get to do. I either get to be there sometimes, I get to share the joy in what they do. And it's a beautiful thing, it really is. And I really enjoy my job. I'm really proud to have such an awesome job. I really am.
BDC is quite, I guess, relatively sort of new.
Sure.
Drum company.
It is. We are 7 years young at the moment. The company was formed in 2015. And, it was the first couple of years was really just kind of setting up the brand, starting to develop a few key products, which is obviously vitally important in terms of people recognizing what you do. And on that note, specifically, really starting to enforce the image of the B in people's minds, because it's so important. The brand recognition is one of the most important things ever. And it's always a really, really interesting subject for me because I'll give you a sort of example, so you could, maybe speak to any random person that watches shows on TV or, just listens to music and isn't a musician necessarily. And you could say to them, have you ever heard of Zildjian, for example, maybe? And they would probably say, what was that you just said to me? I don't understand that word. It began with a Z. Yeah. And then you could go, well, let me show you this logo. And they would be like, I've seen that on every Jules Holland, every Glastonbury, every Top of the Pops, and all the millions of other things. And it just shows you the importance of really reinforcing not just what the name of a brand, but what a brand looks like. So, that's a big part of our strategy really, is to just really, sort of reinforce that imagery into people's heads. It is really important. But yeah, so that was the first couple of years. And then in 2017, we were very fortunate. We got some distribution with a fantastic company in Belgium called EMD Music. They're a really big company. And we kind of really struck lucky at that point, because they didn't just distribute here in the UK, which would have been wonderful, and they didn't just distribute in the Benelux or in Germany or Austria or Switzerland or any of those places that they distribute. They do them all. And as a massive fat cherry on top, they also do North America. So suddenly with one fantastic deal, we were able to get our products out to a lot of places that weren't, I wouldn't say inaccessible, but certainly less accessible at that point in time for a fledgling company that was really just kind of setting up. Thankfully, I think it's down to the heritage of the brand that allowed us to really kind of get an early foot up on the ladder. Because people recognized the good work that Keith had done, not only at KD Drums, which is his first custom drum company here in the UK, but of course after that he was with Premier, and anyone that's worked with Premier in the past is treated with a lot of respect. They were a really special brand. And a lot of people recognize that they were our brand, I guess. So, and when I say our, I mean us as the UK. It was something to be proud of. So Keith, that obviously added a lot of weight to what Keith was capable of, and who would pay attention to the work that he was doing. So it was really, really cool. So that was 2017 when we got the distribution with the MD, and what that instantly meant for us was growth. We had to very, very quickly get ourselves together and figure out how to build enough drums to take care of these markets. It wasn't going to be an easy task. And the first thing that we had to do was get a much bigger factory, which started off as a workshop, and we can't call it a workshop anymore. It is a working factory now. It's not the biggest factory in the world. It's I think it's about 11,500 square foot. So it's sizable. And we have a team of around, in total, I think we've got around about mid-20s. Altogether. On the shop floor, we've probably got 16 or so, depending on the time. It does vary a little bit, but yeah, more or less, if we're fully staffed, there's probably about 16 people working at various different sections around the factory, and that would be anything from prep, where the veneer is prepared for the shell builders, all the way through to shell building, obviously. Beyond shell building, there's a lot of other processes like marking out, drilling, bearing edging, and snare beds, which is massive work. Very, very important, fundamental stuff. Because we do everything by hand, it really is very, very artisan. And in that sense, anyway, I wouldn't say that we're specifically a sort of artisan company, but we definitely have that sort of ethos in our mind when it comes to the way we build our products, with a lot of care, a lot of attention, a lot of blood, sweat and tears, literally, and tons and tons of finger contact with everything. So yeah, it is a beautiful thing. Yeah, other sections in the factory, sorry, I'm digressing slightly, but other sections in the factory would be things like finishing, where we've got the spray shop. We do a lot of paint jobs and sparkles and lacquer jobs, which are, it's just really, really incredible, some of the stuff that's coming out of there. And then we have the assembly, the quality control, and then the logistics department, which is sending stuff out on pallets all over the place. So it's quite an organization. We're still relatively small, but it's still quite the thing to be involved in.
Yeah, definitely. Well, while on the topic of making the drums, I wanted to talk about, I saw on the website is it the cold molding?
Yeah, cold press.
Cold press. Yeah. I wonder if you could just discuss what that entails and how it's different to other drum companies.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the easiest way to explain it would be, first of all, before all these things existed, like hydraulics and heated molds and all that kind of stuff, people were making ply drums. I guess if you went all the way back, when people were making drums, they were just carving out trees, hollowing out a tree. And that would eventually have some kind of animal hide over the top of it, tension somehow, and that would create some kind of percussive tone. And over time, things developed, and people started making drums out of ply, nice thin veneers of wood. And the original process for doing that, of course, wasn't with heat or with hydraulics, because they didn't exist yet. It was with some kind of mold and glue and, skill. That's what it was all about. It all comes down to the skill of it. It's a really artisan skill.
And would you say that's the very sort of unique thing for the BDC?
I would. But I say unique. There are certainly other drum brands around the world, usually smaller brands that do that kind of manufacturing. But for us, the way it works, it allows us to retain something that's really special to us. And, over time, things develop, processes develop. We will evolve in lots of different ways as we become a bigger brand. But, this is the way we love to do it. And this is something that we really give a lot of credit, when it comes to the sound of our drums, to the way we make them. And it's certainly the kind of feedback that we get from our customers and our artists about the drums. They really feel the process in their instrument. And it's something that I talk about quite a bit. I do see what we do as building drums, obviously, because we build drums. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But I kind of see what our drums as more of a conduit for people's creativity, as opposed to a drum. It is a drum, of course, but that creativity and the way that an idea starts here in somebody's mind, and it develops through the process of playing to a point where people then hear it. We get right in between that process. And I think the more connected you are to the thing that's allowing you to achieve that, the better you're going to be at achieving it, and the more you appreciate the skill level that's gone into it. And like I said before, the blood, sweat and tears that have gone into making that drum, it makes you feel different about the drum. You're more connected with your instrument, and that is how to get the best out of yourself, your playing, and your skill.
Yeah. How much involvement do the artists have in making the kit? Because it definitely seemed, because I looked at the artists on the roster of who you have, and they all sort of talked about the passion that BDC has. And I mean, from like signing them up to the end kit, are they really, finding the perfect drum all the way through?
Well, I would say it's very much down to the individual artist to be as involved or as uninvolved as they want to be. But we've been very, very fortunate so far that I can't really think, without exception, really, every artist that we've got on the roster has been involved in the process, at least on a aesthetic level, at the very, very least. But beyond that, there's a lot more to it. We had Mark Richardson in the factory a couple of months ago when he was in Manchester for something, and we were just prepping his kit ready to go out on the next Skunk Anansie tour. And he came in the factory and he was putting screwing bolts on himself. He was literally just there putting badges on, fixing lugs onto the inside of his drums because he wanted to be involved in that part of the process. It was a really, really nice thing for him to be able to do. So, of course, yes, every artist has some version of involvement, some more than others. Some of the time it's a very design-heavy process. Maybe not so much with Mark, where we decide on a finish and we decide on which series he's going to be using. But with someone like Nico, for example, that's a design-heavy process. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. Obviously, Iron Maiden are a humongous organisation as well as being a huge band. So when it comes to working through artwork and approvals for things, making sure that everything's in line with their general aesthetic. It's all about getting that right. It's hard to really explain how specific things need to be when it comes to Nico's kit. It's so important. And, he really knows what he likes. He really knows what's right for the band. And he knows what's right in terms of the visuals and the sound. And it's really, really nice to work with someone like that that's been that's just so experienced in this industry, that's literally done it all, had every conversation there is to have when it comes to stuff like that, and understands their instrument, but also their needs on a really specific level, which actually in some ways makes it really, really easy, but also makes it tricky sometimes because we have to achieve that, especially when it comes to not the drum building, because that's something we excel at, that's something we're really good at. But when it comes to very specific design stuff, then it's about working with our graphic designer, to get everything perfect and in line with the Maiden aesthetic, and or more specifically the album specific artwork and things like that. So it's a lot of fun, but it's a big challenge,
It's cool to hear that someone like him as well, I mean, cares so much still after all these years, about his drums. He hasn't got lazy or anything, hasn't gone, that'll do. There's another tour. He's gone, right, let's get this perfect. So that's brilliant. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
With the actual, the drum kits, I see there's the Legend series and the Live Lounge series.
That's correct, yeah.
It seems like, and this isn't a diss, but you're going for quality over quantity.
Yeah.
So you've got like a limited range,
Mhm.
but you're making them the best they can be.
Yeah.
What's the sort of fundamental difference between those two series of kits?
That's a great question. Okay, so I mean, just in reference to your first comment, you are right. You know, we don't have an extensive range of drums. We have two lines right now, very specifically when it comes to drum set, Legend and Lounge. Things evolve, things happen in the future. I know for a fact that, you know, we're going to develop new things in the future. It goes without saying. But right now we're very comfortable with the Legend and the Lounge. You know, we're still only 7 years young, so it's a really important thing to remember. And whilst we only have two lines of drum set, we also have an ever-growing line of snare drums. So, you know, whereas we don't have loads in one, we kind of make up for it in another way. But in terms of Legend and Lounge, well, they are fundamentally two very different kits. Of course, they're both built using the same manufacturing methods, which is the cold press molding, which I didn't get too much into the tech side of things earlier on. I can tell you as much as you want to know about that stuff if you want to know. But the fundamental differences are that whereas the Legend series is an all birch set, 45-degree bearing edges, 6mm shell, temp-plies, it's very, very clean. It's got a lot of power and projection. That's really a big part of it. It's designed to cut through the loudest of musical settings, especially with those 45-degree bearing edges. You know, really, really help make it sort of cut through. Other things, it has like the single sort of lugs. You know, so it's a little bit more of a contemporary aesthetic. So that's kind of the Legend series. But if you look over at the Lounge, we've gone for more of a vintage aesthetic. It's a little bit more classic. And of course, that's not just in terms of the way it looks and the hardware, you know, with the full length lugs and things like that, shallower bass drum, but also in terms of the tonality of the drum. So we chose to go with a birch and mahogany shell. And that mahogany really sort of lowers the timbre of the kit, brings down the pitch, softens it out, darkens it up a little bit, 30-degree round overs on that one instead, so it's, you know, it doesn't project in the same way. It's loud, it's a drum kit, of course, but it's not as loud as a Legend kit. And it's, you know, it's a weird one because I don't like to tell people how to use drums. You know, everyone has a sound in their head, and it doesn't matter whether you're playing metal and you want to use a Lounge kit. You know, that's fine. If that's the sound that you want, it's fine. But, you know, we tend to find that one's a little more contemporary, one's a little bit more classic. And if you're going for more of a vintage feel, you'd probably go for the Lounge series instead.
You mentioned about like the 45-degree and the 30-degree bearing. Am I right in thinking that's like at the tip of the rim of the drum where then the skin sits? So
yeah, exactly.
And you mentioned like, the Legend has the 45-degree. So essentially, is that minimizing contact on the skin?
Exactly, you got it.
So what result does that give you? This is just my ignorance, but I've heard the terms before, but I've never really thought about that angle making a difference tonally to the drums.
Well, let's look at it this way. So let's imagine a 45-degree bearing edge like we're talking about right now. If that's the drum head, then the shell is making that kind of contact. It's straight on. It's a thin edge that the drum head is sat on. But if we're talking about a 30-degree round over bearing edge, it's making that kind of contact. So you can see that the surface area that is actually making contact with the head is completely different. One's a sharp line and the other one's a round kind of buffed up piece against it. So what that automatically does straight away, the obvious thing, is that it sort of slightly dampens the head because there's more contact. So what that does instantly is kind of subdue the tonality of the drum, stops it from projecting in the same way.
Okay.
Yeah, but it also, you know, you can apply other descriptive words like warmth and darkness and things like that. You know, it's funny how people like perceive sound and how they try to find adjectives to describe what they're hearing. But those are kind of really, really easy ways to describe it. A 45-degree bearing edge is going to give you a lot more cut, a lot more projection, a lot more power, and it will be cleaner sounding. Whereas a 30-degree will be darker, lower, warmer, a little bit more dampened, and maybe not quite as aggressive sounding. That's the key thing. Yeah. I mean, there's other things as well, other fundamentals of a drum set that makes it sound a certain way. Bearing edges are one of them. You know, the inner ply of the drum itself is, you know, very, very influential on the sound of the drum. You know, so a birch drum will sound very, very different to a walnut drum or a mahogany drum or something like that because, you know, it's just the way the sound works with the material itself, and even down to the grain orientation can make a difference to the sound of the drum, because it affects how the sound, how the air moves around the drum once you strike it at the top. If you were to slow-mo everything, and you could see the sound wave and the way it moves around, it's completely different depending on the orientation. So there's a lot going on. But you can also change stuff as well. Different types of hoops, different types of heads. Those are the things that are kind of more in your control when you're on a drum set. You can make things sound fatter using a different type of head, or you can dampen things off a little bit by putting a die-cast hoop on instead of a triple flange hoop, for example. There's tons of tricks and things that you can do.
I was going to say also, if you did want to delve more into the cold press molding, you're welcome to, just definitely. To kind of explain what that was, because
absolutely, So
I think as well that I guess and a quick comparison as to why it's different.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we didn't really get into that so much. So earlier on, I sort of alluded to the fact there's the sort of heated hydraulic method of creating molds, drums, and the cold press version. So we cold press, which basically means that our prep guy will provide the shell builders with a bundle of plies, and those plies are cut to approximate size in terms of length, but also in terms of depth, usually about 1/2 inch over the depth that the drum is going to end up in the end. And it will be the shell builder's job to take each one of those individual veneers, which have been pressed into cores of 2 or 3, and they will be fitting each one of those sets into the mold one by one, but cutting it precisely by hand in order to be able to get that absolute perfect fit. So once the perfect fit is in, and the actual ply will literally click into place, you will hear an audible click as the ply sort of tensions into the mold. And at that point, it's essentially tensioning itself. It's pushing itself out into the mold. So once we've got the sizing right, we'll then remove it. We'll add the glue, which again is done by hand. We don't use any glue rollers or anything like that, because there are imperfections that can come from using machines to do things like glue. Sometimes it could miss out a strip of glue, which means that in one section on the inside of the ply, it isn't glued down properly, and you'll never know it's there. You'll never see it, but it's not perfect. And this is the thing for BDC. We're always in the pursuit of perfection. It's like a no compromise approach to building. So this method, although it's certainly longer and more complex for sure, we believe it just creates a much better shell, a much sturdier shell, and perhaps a more resonant shell as well. And that's not to take anything away from all the other manufacturers that use a completely different method, which is using these heated hydraulic molds, because some of the best drums in the world have been made using these hydraulic molds. So it's certainly no criticism. And, we take our hat off to every major and smaller boutique drum brand who are just out there doing their thing, because it's so important. It's so important to be, forwarding this awesome sort of community that we've got of drummers and drum brands and geekery and fan bases, and it's a beautiful thing. But the way a lot of these other mainstream brands manufacture, because they're manufacturing en masse and they're manufacturing to a mainstream sort of drumming audience, it's all about productivity and efficiency. And although that's true of us as well, it's kind of just one of those things that we do it differently. So the way another manufacturer might perhaps build a drum would be similar to us. They'll be provided with some plies, and their shell builder will literally bend those plies into a cylinder and pop them into a heated hydraulic mold, shut the lid, push the button, and heat it up. 10 minutes later, out comes the shell. And that shell's good, and it can then be worked on. It can be wrapped, or it can be lacquered, or get a paint job, or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that method of building drums. It's absolutely fine. It's just different to the way that we do it. And we just believe that, the way we do it is awesome.
With thickness of ply, you see, like, you're just browsing, shopping for a drum kit, and you see, 6 ply, 10 ply. But I'd never felt that was ever explained, like, by then the kit manufacturer, like what that's going to do to the drum or to the sound. So between a thin ply and a thick ply, even forgetting for the minute the different types of wood used.
What's
a thicker ply?
Resonance and pitch. are the sort of different things that you get. Like usually the thicker a drum, the higher the pitch. It makes a massive difference to the pitch of the drum. And equally, the amount of plies that you use can change the resonance of the drum as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny how all this new stuff about that.
I know, this is
playing them for 25 years.
Yeah, exactly.
I just went, well, that's purple and sparkly. I love that one, you know.
Yeah, exactly. and to be fair, a lot of drummers do buy with their eyes. You know, they're not so interested in the science of the whole process. But in reality, sound's really, really important. And if you're a guitar player, they seem to be a lot more educated when it comes to how to achieve certain sounds. It's actually kind of handed to them in a sense, because
they just let a load of boxes do it for them.
Exactly. But each one of those boxes says wah or distortion or flanger or chorus. It's literally handed to them. That's how you achieve your sound. But for drummer, it's very, very, very different to that. You know, we have to understand what sound a certain wood can achieve in order to understand the sound of the drum kit. So if you have an idea for a sound in your head when you're in the studio writing an album with a band, in order to be able to accurately find that sound, you need to understand how to get that sound. And you'll know that if I'm looking for something really dark, something really, really low, perhaps I want to be thinking about walnut, or I want to be thinking about mahogany or something like that. Whereas if I'm looking for something really bright, perhaps I want to be thinking about birch. It's that kind of thing. So education is vitally important. And it is one of the things that I spend probably too much time talking to people about. Probably.
No, it's perfect podcast to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. Podcast fodder.
Snare drums
are
one of my favorite things about the kit. And you mentioned earlier BDC have got, have a more expansive range of snare drums. Do you want to just talk more about?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just trying to think about so we've got quite an extensive line. We've got, for example, the Merlin snare drum, which is probably our signature snare drum. It was like the first model that we released. It got a lot of attention from the press. It won some awards, things like that. It was a fantastic thing, and that's a birch and mahogany, and this is the one that we were talking about earlier on. It's 10.5 mil thick, so it's a really, really chunky shell. It's finished in black tulip wood with a double pinstripe inlay, which again has all been done by hand. You know, we're very proud to say that we actually inlay very, very much during the prep process of the drum building rather than afterwards. Some drum manufacturers, they'll build a shell, and if it's getting an inlay, they'll literally make the shell and then route the inlay section out before fitting in the inlay, which is fine. It's a nice way to make drums, but we actually glue the veneer together with the inlay in the first place. And we actually make the inlay ourselves in the factory, which is another totally bonkers thing that we just do because we love it. It gives us the ability and a lot of scope to be really creative with the way we do things. So if we're doing like a unique project for someone, we can literally dictate the colors of the inlays, for example, and do it accordingly. So yeah, that's the Merlin, which has got a lot of nice work. We've got the Maverick snare drum, which is a maple, all maple shell, which is, everybody loves the sound of a maple snare drum. It's a really reliable and trustworthy kind of sound, and it's a great thing to have as your main snare, or sometimes your sort of backup snare, your B snare, whatever. That's really, really good. We've got the Big Softy. It's a bit of a wild card snare drum, I have to say. It's kind of interesting. When you look at it, it looks like a cherry drum. If you look on the inside, it looks like cherry as well, but it's actually the filling to the sandwich that is the special ingredient in this drum. It's a wood that's called acroma, which you probably haven't heard of. No. Most people haven't, but you will have heard of its other name, which is balsa.
Right. Balsa wood.
Yeah. So balsa wood is a very, very soft and bendy, porous wood. It's got millions of little micropores running through it. And those micropores, they actually really help the sound in a very specific way. Because what they do is they sort of filter out the highest frequencies.
Wow.
You end up with this drum that's very, very happy. It will tune higher, but it loves the medium to low tuning. It's really, really nice. It has a soft tone to it. And those micropores, they just kind of take away those high frequencies. So you don't, obviously when you tune a drum, you're tensioning the head. Yeah. And a byproduct of tensioning it or detensioning it is tuning it or detuning it. Yeah. Well, if you want to tune something low, you have to down tension it, right? And the more you take the tension off a drum, it changes the way the stick feels on the drum. You know what it feels like when you've got a saggy snare and your stick kind of sinks in a little bit further than you want it to. Yeah, well, it's that kind of thing. So if you want to go low, you have to compromise on the tension of the head. With the Big Softy, you can achieve those lows without tuning very low. So it really doesn't affect the tension of the head at all.
I think I need to get one of those because
Yeah,
on some, like if I'm session drumming in the studio, there was a session recently where the engineer, we wanted the snare, he wanted the snare lower in pitch. And for me, it was like, I'm just not getting the stick bounce and feel that I normally like. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great drum. It works. It's a really, really nice studio drum. It's so nice under the mics. I mean, I know people that use it live as well, but for me, it's just one of those really, really nice drums that, you pull out in the studio and it just gives you everything you need. It's really, really cool. So yeah, there are others. There's the Super 7. It's 13x7. It's the only size that we do it in. But 13x7 is such a fun size for a snare drum. It really pops. It's got a great crack to it. Purple Heart's a very, very hard wood. And that is kind of, you can hear that in the tone of the drum as well. The shell builders, actually, they were telling me that when they're cutting the veneer for the Purple Heart snare drums, it's so much harder than the birch that they normally do that they get through about 3 times as many blades when they're cutting it, because it just doesn't cut in the same way, which is kind of an interesting little snippet. But that's a really, really nice drum, and it's kind of finished in a kind of fiddleback sycamore. So if you imagine like the back side of a violin or a cello,
right,
that sort of like tiger stripy thing coming off it.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now on the website.
Sexy, right?
I knew
I could tell that you were eyeballing.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Ben, are you getting distracted? What's going on?
The inside looks so nice, like
Yeah, it's sexy. It's very sexy.
Can I have one of each, please?
Of course you can. I'll send you a price list. You can have one of everything.
What's your favourite out of the pick? What's your BDC kit setup?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'm a Legend guy. As a rule, I do like that Legend sound, but I have to say that I really, really love the most our lounge bass drums. 24-inch lounge series bass drum is for me the best sounding bass drum I've ever heard. But I think because of the nature of some of the music that I've historically played, Legend was a better choice for the sound for the band. Right, but for my personal taste, a 24-inch lounge series bass drum is it's the daddy. It really is. It really
is. Skins, obviously, like they play such an important part on the sound of a drum.
They do.
So, does BDC have in mind, like, when you're testing drums, do you have a specific skin you're using that gives you like a control over the whole range, so you can hear the difference of the drum that's not being affected by a different skin, maybe? Or are you testing all of them?
No, yeah. I mean, that's really, really good that you said that. I mean, it's a really, really interesting thing to have come out with. Not many people would think of it like that, but yeah, you're absolutely right. We, at one point or another, up until I'm going to give you some points for that one, seriously, because it's very true that we deliberately chose a head to go on our drums that is the most neutral choice that you can find, because everybody is very unique in the way they want their drums to sound. And, much like a Shure SM58 is the industry standard microphone, or has been for a long time, it may not be anymore. The heads that we choose to use are also an industry standard in that sense. And it's nice to be able to provide a drum with a very, very sort of neutral setting where people can choose whether they want to go for something thicker or something thinner, single ply, double ply, with dampening, without dampening. It's all very unique, just as unique as we all are as humans, that our drum sound is the same,
Is it cheeky to ask what skin that is?
No, it's not cheeky.
Is that giving away anything?
No. Well, if you went into a shop and bought one of our drums now, you'd notice that they have Remo Ambassadors on all our snare drums. Okay. So the Remo Ambassador is certainly the industry standard drum head for sure. So yeah.
Which snare would you go for out of the bunch?
That's a great question. Well, we didn't go through the entire lineup, but if we did, we would have got certainly to the 2 Nico signature snare drums, one of which is called the Talisman and one of which is called the Icarus. The Talisman is a steel shell. It's British steel. It's a big, fat, chunky steel shell. It weighs a ton, and it's awesome. And it'd probably be that. I mean, it's about as subtle as a sledgehammer, but it's just absolutely fantastic. It's beautiful. It sounds incredible. Nico loves it, and if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'd probably be the one.
With the range of snare drums, is each snare like a specific size, or do you do like the Super 7 in different sizes, or are you no, this drum is built to be a 14x7 or a?
Yeah. Good question. Again, sorry, you are coming out with all the good ones, Ben. I've got to say, George, you're letting us down, bro.
I know. I'll log off now.
And get me couch.
Yeah.
So, certain snare drums that we have, for example, the Maverick or the Merlin, they're available in a couple of different sizes because we have done a lot of R&D, we've done a lot of prototyping, and we know that a Merlin 14-inch snare drum, for example, will sound great as a 5.5 or a 6.5. We just know it's going to work. Whereas, for example, a Big Softy is only available in a 14x6, and a Super 7 currently is only available in a 13x7. And that's because at this stage, we've kind of gone through the process. And certainly with the Big Softy, we tried so many different variations on the depth of that drum. You know, we wanted to see what it'd be like to go lower, even lower, 7, 8. You know, we experimented with that as well, just to see. But we really settled on the 6 because it's just, so it's 6.5 because it's just a really, really nice size for that drum. And it's just perfect. So a lot of the things that we decide on doing, we do because we've worked through a rigorous process of prototyping to get to the point of being sure.
I like that fact that you're putting the trust in you guys.
Yeah.
To say this is the size.
Yeah.
This drum should be.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sometimes if you pick a snare and they're like, "What size do you want?" and you could have any size, or you're like, "Well, you tell me what size."
Yeah, what size do I need?
Snare drum, it works best at. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I tend to like a deeper drum personally. Sort of 6.5 for me is great. I like my drums to have a little bit more body to them. My snare drums in particular, for a primary snare drum at least. Obviously, if you've got auxiliary snare drums going on, then you literally are looking for a different kind of sound anyway if you've got a second snare drum. So you might want something that's really, really high pitched. I used to have like a 10-inch sort of soprano snare on my side. Historically, there's a couple of our artists that have got 10-inch Merlins. Actually, we built 10-inch Merlins. So imagine a Merlin which is already 20 plies fat, but only by 10-inch. It's just amazing when you look on the inside of it. There's barely any gap. It's super cool. And then they sound amazing. That I told you before that the thicker a shell, the higher the pitch. So of course, a 20 ply and a smaller diameter just is amazing. So if you've got artists that like to sort of break into sort of drum and bass and little separate sections in songs, or if you're playing reggae, you want to drop the snares off and have a sort of timbali kind of sound. They work really, really, really well for that kind of thing as well. You can just switch it around and get versatile.
Let's go back in time.
Sure.
And I assume when you start, when you started playing drums, BDC didn't exist. And we do like to ask what people's first kits were. Because I think, me and George, we've talked about it before. Mm-hmm. They're often pretty rubbish.
Yeah.
But they're quite hilarious to find out what sort of these first kits are. And when did you start learning? And what was your entry into kits? Okay.
Well, I mean, I actually got into drums quite late, I think. When I first started with playing music, I was a bass player. My best friend was a guitar player, and I was obsessed with like Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue, and I just wanted to be Duff or Nicky Six, and I just wanted that really, really cool vibe. And I started playing bass. That was probably like age 14, and then age 17, I just pretty much sat behind a drum kit for the first time and realized that I can just play a 4/4 beat. This kind of works. I don't know how I'm doing this, but I'm doing it. It's working. And just by complete fluke, our drummer quit, and we knew loads and loads of bass players, but we didn't know any drummers. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to have a go. And I guess I was 17, and that was it then for me. I was just completely obsessed from that second onwards. So my first kit was a Premier APK, black, had the full length lugs on it, black shells on the inside, black painted shells on the inside. To be honest with you, it was not a crap kit. It was an absolutely great first kit. It really was, and it set me on a path. And if it wasn't for that first kit, I wouldn't be doing the things that I'm doing. I wouldn't be having this chat with you guys now, to be honest with you. Because it was that sort of early days nerdery that followed through all the way through my 20s and my 30s. I'm in my mid 40s now, so things that it's bonkers, really. It's just Premier APK. But even then, it shows you how important it is to how you look to the top. I bought that Premier APK, but the whole time that I had it, I was looking at Signia going, it will be mine. Oh yes, it will be mine. You know, so it shows you how like branding can work and how product sort of stuff can work and how you can really get into something and then start somewhere and aspire to head towards the top. It's really important. It's really important stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember getting a Pearl pamphlet through just, before the internet. So it was all printed catalogues, and it was a Pearl Masters Custom Gold. And at the time, my first kit was a awful white cheap thing. Then I got a Pearl Export, but in my head was like the Pearl Masters Custom Gold that's where I want to end up.
Yeah,
I haven't got one.
I was going to say, did you get it yet?
No.
That's not the best ending to this story, is it?
No.
Well,
but
we should get BDC instead.
Well,
Is it? You've asked a lot of good questions. Yeah.
You have actually asked a lot of good questions. So
that's how you get an endorsement. Yeah. Ask good questions.
So are you currently playing for bands or anything? Or?
Not depressingly. I'm not at the moment. I'm struggling to. Life's hectic right now. Work obviously is takes up a lot of my time. But I've got family as well. So I was playing until a few years ago. The first 2 years at BDC, I was still playing in bands, but it's kind of weird situation where I accidentally got into a band. I got contacted by a friend of mine who was a guitarist in an old band of mine, and he was like, "Hey, dude, I've written some songs. Do you want to hear them?" I'm like, "I'm not really interested in being a band." "Oh, let me send them over." So I listened to them. I was like, "Whoa, they are really good. They're really good songs." And instantly, I was like, "Shit." So I went and had a jam, and it just felt great. And it just so happened to be that the singer's best friend worked for Live Nation. And if you've got friends at Live Nation, then you're doing all right. So we all of a sudden randomly started picking up all these great support slots and festivals and tours. And I was like, shit, how am I going to make this work? I've got a job that I love, that I'm passionate about. And I've got a family at home, that require some attention and looking after and all the rest of it. And it just came down to a choice, really. So I quit that band so they could go on to do what they do without having someone going, "Oh, I don't know how I'm going to get the time off from work," and, all that kind of stuff. I let them be. And I carried on playing a little bit in a few function bands, but I just didn't, I quit doing that as well because that, again, was taking up time too. I just don't have the impetus to get back in a band with people that are trying to succeed. And every time I try and get in a band with people that don't, it's okay, we can just get together and have a jam. Cool, let's get together and be creative. Cool, we wrote some songs. Awesome. Maybe we should go and play a gig. Yeah, let's go. That was an awesome gig. Maybe we should go in the studio and record a song. Yeah, we just done a demo. That's awesome. Let's get some more gigs. Let's get a tour. Let's get back in the studio and do it. And before you know it, you're back in that band again. So when I find a bunch of musicians that really just want to play just for the sake of playing and creating, then I'll join a band again. And I think I'm heading back towards that at the moment, to be honest with you, because I'm craving it massively. I've been a drummer for such a long time, and I still play, but I don't play with other people so much. It is something that I'd really like to get back into, and I've got more space for it in my life now as well at the moment too. Yeah. So yeah.
Is your son getting into drums at all? Has that rubbed off on him?
That's a great question. He was. He really was, and then he wasn't. So when he was maybe 2-3, I bought him a little baby kit, and I never said go play drums, go and be a drummer or anything like that. I just used to sit him on my knee watching like videos on YouTube of drummers when he was a baby, and then put this kit in the corner of the room and sort of said, when you're ready, just go and play with it if you want to. And he didn't really. He wasn't really bothered. But on his 8th birthday, he came to me and he was like, "Dad, I want a drum kit, and I think I want some drum lessons." I was like, awesome. Went out, bought him some electronics, got him some drum lessons, and he did that consistently for about, I want to say about 2 years, 2.5 years or something. Was getting really, really good, and then discovered football and PlayStation. And that was the end of it. That was the death knell for drumming. So, yeah, no drums anymore, but, never say never. He may come back to it.
Yeah.
One final question for you.
Sure.
Who's your favourite delivery company?
Ooh.
Okay, I'm going to rephrase. I'm going to might split this up into 2 parts. Yeah. Okay, so you've ordered something online.
Yeah.
You get the notification from the courier.
Yeah.
Who is it that makes you happy that they're delivering it?
Yeah.
And who is it that makes you annoyed they're delivering it.
All right, cool. Yeah, I can do that.
And then there's another part.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll tackle the first part first, yeah?
Yeah.
So if I got a notification and it was from a courier, there was a company, a new one that I've never heard of before, that just delivered something for me the other day. I was really happy with their service. I don't know why.
Okay,
but yeah, I liked the notification style. I liked this new name coming up on my phone that I'd never seen before. I can't remember what the call. I think it was Every.
Yeah.
I want to say it was Every. I just like the cut of their jib. I don't know why.
Okay.
Yeah. And the ones that I would dread, and again, I can't tell you it's because I've had any really negative experiences myself, but Hermes. Yeah. I know tons of people that have had negative experiences with Hermes. So I've got this like disdain for them without even having a reason to.
So this might blow your mind.
It's going to shock you.
But Every is Hermes rebranded.
Shit off.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But they've obviously seen the error of their ways.
Wow.
I think they rebranded just because of that. You know what I mean?
They were like,
knew
everyone hates us.
Yeah.
We need to change the name.
That's been the best one yet.
Well, if I'm a social experiment,
yeah,
I just nailed it. I just absolutely nailed it. Wow. Well, you just blown my mind, guys. Thank you.
That's
perfect.
Right. Yeah.
That was a genuine reaction. I couldn't believe that you just told me that.
And my follow-up to that is,
sure,
who does the BDC trust to deliver kits?
Fuck, that's a good question.
That is a good question, isn't it? So we actually do work with a couple of different courier companies. It depends where it's going, actually, to be honest with you. And also, just not to overcomplicate the answer to this, a lot of our customers, i.e. distributors, they collect their own gear. So we've seen our drums leaving with DHL and FedEx and UPS and blah, blah, blah. But also we have people, when we send stuff out ourselves, it's nothing to do with them. DHL, quite common, yeah, and seem to do a decent job for us. I always used to like the FedEx guy that used to come. He was just always dead friendly. He was like a little old dude, and he just had a nice vibe. He just had a really, really nice vibe. Yeah, so he was pretty cool. Yeah, we've used FedEx as well. Yeah, I think we've probably been through them all at one point or another, to be honest with you. We've not had any, have we? I'm just trying to think if we've had any major disasters. I do feel like something got messed up once. I can't remember who it was. I feel like I think once at some point a Spalted Beach Legend Series special edition bass drum got absolutely trashed going somewhere. I can't remember what happened, but I think it got like a forklift through it or something. Yeah, it was horrible. That was traumatic. I remember that at the time. Yeah, we don't have too many issues, to be quite honest with you. We're quite lucky because the majority of stuff leaves on pallets. And when something goes in a pallet, it generally gets forklifted into the back of the truck or wheeled onto the back of the truck, and it lives on that pallet the whole time. It doesn't get thrown around like an individual box might. Yeah. So there's much less risk of anything happening in that regard anyway. So
fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
There we go. Yeah. Exactly.
Have you got a good question for me, George?
No, I've given up now. I'll let Ben take it from there. I didn't dare say anything else.
Incredible.
But yeah, where's the best place for people to find what's going on with the BDC?
Yeah, sure. So our website, obviously, www.britishDrumCo.com. We've also got facebook.com/British Drum Co, at British Drum Co on Instagram, Twitter, all the usual stuff. You will find us very, very easily if you just type in those special letters. Nice and simple. But thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate you having me.
Thank you for your time, man.
It's been a great opportunity to talk at you. Thank you for letting me talk at you. It's like winding him up and watch him go.
Yeah, Tina said Mel will be very enthusiastic to talk to you. So,
I bet she did.
Yeah. But no, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's a pleasure.
Speak to you soon. Take it easy.
Cheers, Mel. Thanks.
See you later.
Yeah. Bye.
There we go.
There you go. That was our interview. Can we just say the delivery bit at the end was probably the best one yet?
Yeah. As soon as he said Every, and I kind of was like, I think I know where this is going.
Yeah.
Just waiting for him to say Hermes was the shit one. And then we blew his mind.
We did blow his mind. Can we just shock you with this?
Yeah.
No.
But I tell you what though, George.
Go on.
I really want to play on a BDC kit.
I know. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I've never played on one, and I think as well I'd go for the Legend kit the more punchy contemporary one. I think that would suit my sound and playing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's just the idea of going to a drum company and choosing what you want. You know, I love that idea of, because I've been, not to bang on about it, but recently I've been thinking I want a fatter snare. You know,
Sure.
I feel like when I really whack it, I'm still like, it still sounds a bit like, I don't know, ping, like just not quite as full as I want. Just imagine going to a warehouse and they go, right, here's 100 snares. Which one do you want?
The trouble is we're nobodies.
That is the problem.
So we just got to go to shops like normal people.
This is it, and this is why this podcast is for the everyman. This is because we're the Graham Russell gang.
We're getting, you know, an insight into the top level, and they're chatting to us, but then they're closing the door as they leave and going, and they're waving at us through the window of the door, and we're like sort of stood there, and the camera pans out, and then it starts raining.
Yeah, exactly. And we're stood there in the rain.
Yeah, and then we go and wait for the bus home.
Yeah.
And then the bus is cancelled. And then someone comes and takes a shit on the bus stop. And then the car drives past. And no, the bus turns up. It says not in service. And it just keeps going. And then the puddle splashes us. And then your trousers fall down.
I love the idea of someone listening to this for the first time going, well, these two drummers are talking to Mel Stewart. They must be somewhat recognised. But no, literally just in the trough.
No.
As you say.
But big thanks to Mel for coming on and chatting about it. It's definitely some interesting stuff. I didn't know the bearing thing and the ply. You're like, oh, it all makes sense. But no one ever really taught me about it, you know?
No, because why would you know? You know, the drums are made already.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I don't really care how cheese is made. But if I learn, I mean, I eat a lot of cheese, but if someone taught me, I'd be like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Didn't know it was made in a wheel, you know? Not in a wheel, but into a wheel. Anyway, probably rambling on. That'll be the heat stroke.
Yeah. Well, you go and enjoy the rest of your holiday, mate.
Well, one more night. It's only a brief one. And you enjoy gigs and, you know, being tired because it's summer.
Yeah, and we'll be back next week and we can have a catch up about your holiday and gigs because we've been doing lots of gigging.
Yep.
And we'll find out what happened with the groom who wants to play your drums.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen, we had a little poll on the Instagram, didn't we?
Yeah.
Because got your gig, the groom's asked to.
Well, we'll find out what's decided on next week's episode, but the episode after that, I'll try and give as much information on what happens at the wedding, you know.
So what date is the gig?
It's next Thursday.
Okay, so yeah. Right, okay, so yeah.
Yeah, in 3 episodes' time, probably.
Sweet. We'll be back next week. Instagram, Twitter, email us, whatever. Get in touch.
Get in touch. Drum Coach Online if you want to listen.
Oldblacksmiths.com. All the usual shit. And thanks to Mel again. And we'll be back next week. Enjoy the rest of your holiday, George. I miss you.
You too.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Drum and Drummer. You can find us on Instagram at Drum and Drummer Podcast. And you can send us an email to drumanddrummerpod@gmail.com. Remember, just pick up the sticks and twat it.
Right, I'm all done, Mum.